corruption of museums, of orchestras. We've entertained people on this program who have spoken to us about that deep corruption of the theater and of the arts. Corruption of the sciences, where they have shut down STEM. Science is racist because blacks are not performing as well as they are on the basketball court in the physics laboratory. Corruption of which Ibram X. Kendi is a poster child. That's what I'm pissed off about. And I'm with John McWhorter. Hello, everybody. This is The Glenn Show. Glenn Loury, Brown University, senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute. Manhattan Institute sponsors The Glenn Show bi-weekly. There's a conversation at The Glenn Show between myself and my partner, John McWhorter, who teaches at Columbia University and writes for the New York Times. He's with us this week, and we have a special guest. That's Dan Subotnik, who teaches law at Touro Law Center and writes about critical race theory and the law, amongst other things. And he's here as our guest today. Dan, welcome.
Yes, thank you. It's a great pleasure and honor to be with you guys. I follow you guys religiously.
That's good to know. And Dan, you and I go way back. We should also
go way back. Yes,
we've known each other for 20 years. I know your family. You've met some of mine. So yes, good to see you.
Likewise.
So what are we talking about today, gentlemen? John, you got any idea?
Well, Dan, I want to ask you, critical race theory.
Yeah.
I thought critical race theory was all about informing people of unfair power arrangements in society and how they can shape lives. Let's explain to the audience what's wrong with critical race theory.
There's nothing exactly wrong with it. The problem is it's caught on as a mantra, and more than a mantra, as a reigning philosophy in many places where it shouldn't be catching on. And one of the reasons for that, I think, is that we can't have a good discussion about critical race theory because that brings in a discussion about where the Black community fits in to this nation, and it is impossible to say anything about race and the Black community more generally in this environment. I've tried to publish stuff. I'm sure you've tried to publish stuff. You can't do it. And there are people who are working 24/7 to prevent an honest discussion about race, which is why your program is so wonderful.
Dan, you wrote the book Toxic Diversity in the aughts, and it was a very good book. You're saying that there's this resistance. What sort of resistance have you encountered? What is it out there?
Well, I feel okay. The book wasn't reviewed. It was published by NYU Press. It was reviewed in one law review. Here I am writing about race and law, and I couldn't get the book reviewed. And I've had a devil of a time writing in this area. And I asked you, John, whether I could talk about your experience. Mm-hmm. You told me that was okay, and
yes.
I'd like to drift into that area because my guess is that your listeners do not know about your personal circumstances.
Go ahead. Yeah.
By focusing on you, I am not ignoring Glenn. I would love to hear about, because I know something about your circumstances, but I would love to hear how Glenn fits into the university.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get to that.
So, Dan, you were talking about my circumstances. Which particular ones?
Well, okay, and I'm grateful that you're going to allow me to talk about it. The idea that you don't have a home in a department at Columbia whose vista is race in the United States is sickening to me. There are people who swear allegiance to diversity who don't believe it for 1 second. 1 second. And I would like to contribute to a resolution of that problem.
Well, I think, just to make it clear, at Columbia, my billet is teaching linguistics. That's what I was hired to do. And I do not teach courses on race. Linguistics is harbored within the Slavic department. And so oddly, I'm technically a professor of Slavic, but it's linguistics. But what is definitely true at Columbia, to whom I owe a great deal, I love the institution, but there is a Black Columbia, unofficially, who I think unofficially but conclusively pretend that I do not exist. It's obvious that there is a general idea among Columbia's Black faculty that I am someone where it would be best to pretend that I'm not around and to avoid me getting any more attention than I already do. No one's ever told me this, but it's just that I've been there for 15 years and there are certain things that have never happened. I've never been asked to guest lecture class. I have never been asked to participate on a panel. There'll be posters all over campus of some august panel of people, depending on when it is. It's Ta-Nehisi Coates, it's William Jelani Cobb. I've never been asked to be part of any of those things. I'm sure there is an informal Black faculty social organization at Columbia. Even if it's not on paper, I have never been invited to join it. And I'm sure some of them would say that it seems to me that I wouldn't want to, but frankly, they started it, and there were never any gestures of that kind. And the truth is, people should understand, I'm not complaining in that, honestly, it sounds bad when somebody busy says this because it makes it sound like you think other people aren't busy. But I've got so much to do that I wouldn't have time to do most of those things anyway. But the fact is that I'm not asked. And frankly, it's not right, especially because, even if I had extreme hard right views, it wouldn't be right, but maybe it would be more understandable. But in my case, frankly, I'm just a cranky moderate. And yet I'm not allowed to join in the reindeer games because I'm kind of not the right kind. It's not right. And life will go on. But it's an indication of the sort of thing that you have run up against for different reasons in different places.
And I've also brought up your circumstances on many occasions.
I'm sorry. I just want to follow that last. You, Dan, have similarly been excluded from venues of
not in the same way as John, but I wanted to teach a course in race and critical race theory, and was not able to do that.
I see.
And I'm reluctant to say anything because people go to the dean, and then all of I've heard more than I want to from the dean, so I shy away, except in my writing, where I'm very aggressive, and I think I'm aggressive because of the circumstances which I face at the university.
I'll actually give one more anecdote just for posterity in case I get hit by a bus. This is how these things manifest themselves in real life. It's not a bunch of people turning their backs on you and walking away. The linguistics department, the linguistics program became a major some years ago. We had to make it into an official major instead of one that you had to petition to create. And it was my job to make it a major. And so suddenly, I had to deal with administration for a time, which is not my forte. But I stepped up because that's what I had to do. There was one meeting with a bunch of, august faculty and administrators where I was making my case. I actually put on a jacket, making my case that linguistics needs to be a major. And everybody's so enthusiastic. Everybody loves linguistics from a distance. I'm frankly one of the Black faculty members. I've got a little bit of a public presence. Everybody's happy to see me. One person wasn't. There were about 15 people sitting around a table. One of them was a Black male historian. And he is the one person in the 5 years that I was dealing with trying to make linguistics a major. Luckily, it did happen. The one person who wasn't happy to see me. It was the one person who gave me trouble, bringing up all these administrative procedures that he says I haven't gone through, not enthusiastic. Now, was that an accident? No. I frankly don't remember the name of this person, but it was clear he didn't like me. He knew who I was, and he wanted to give me a hard time. That's not right. I didn't do anything to deserve it.
It's not right. No. Yeah. And you're too much of a gentleman to make a scene, which you could have, and I might have, had I been in your shoes, which is why Columbia hasn't hired me yet.
Yet. He said yet.
Yeah. Well, you guys are going to sponsor me.
Take a look at this guy. He's still got some juice left.
That's true. I've got a little juice left.
Let me just go on the record here a little bit, since we're talking about how we've been treated by our universities. I don't want people to have an inference about my case. That's not true. I've been treated well at Brown on the whole. Ruth Simmons, African-American woman, now retired from her presidency at Brown University, brought me in 2005. I was warmly greeted by colleagues in Afro-American, they call it Africana Studies, and the Center for Race and Ethnicity, which studies that subjects. I was writing left of center in 2005, believe it or not, Dan.
I
was on the incarceration thing. You know, my Tanner lectures were in the works at that time and so forth. And I bonded with people. Ruth asked me to chair a committee that was looking into how to follow up on the Slavery and Justice report, which was the revelation of Brown's long involvement, the Brown family and the slave trade and the commerce associated therewith, creation of archives, the launching of a research center, whose director, Tony Bogues, is a acquaintance of mine. And I've been invited to the conferences and so forth and so on. But when, I don't know when it starts, I guess it starts with Trayvon Martin. And then there's Michael Brown, and and then there's Black Lives Matter, and then there's a racial reckoning, and there's we went through a thing, and it culminated in the summer of 2020, and I felt like I needed to plant a flag on some stuff. I needed to call bullshit on some stuff. And ever since I started writing in places like Quillette.com and, the Manhattan Institute City Journal, and I started objecting to virtue signaling and empty rhetoric, and I started trying to say a university is not a cheerleader for political fads.
Yeah,
we're in it for the long run, and stuff like that. The invitations have dried up. That was going to be my conclusion. I'm here on campus. I'm the Merton Stoltz professor. Blah blah. But I don't get invited to the conferences and or the cocktail parties on the Afro side anymore. God bless them.
Same story. Wow. I wrote to you guys about 3 months ago when I thought of that maybe you'd be interested in having me on your program for a variety of reasons. First of all, I love you guys.
Thank you.
And also, I'm writing an article. I think I sent you a copy. I don't know if you got a chance to read it. But I am now looking for a publisher. And I know you guys are not publishers, but you speak to a wide audience. And somebody may be interested in this article. It's not quite finished, but it's almost finished. And I think it's quite good. And I'm hoping to break through the barriers to honest discussion from my standpoint. So I'm hoping by making this declaration on your program, somebody will jump up and say, I like this guy.
Dan, talk about the article.
Any friend of you guys is a friend of mine. Talk about the article. Okay, so it's called "Can We Really Talk About Critical Race Theory?" And it starts with the idea, and I'm gonna quote. I'm gonna be a little academic here. This is Derek Bell, who is considered to be the father of critical race theory. The racial problem in this country is not people of color, but whites. From Black people living in perilous conditions, rage should be expected. To become productive, that rage must be pointed outward, because Blacks need reassurance that others, not they, are the cause of the wretched. I'm sorry for reading. But the problem is, and he's had an enormous impact, the speaker, Derek Bell. The problem is, once you say your situation is colored by the fact that white people are pushing you down, and you have no power to upset the apple cart in that regard. Once you say that, and I see the whole school of thought as tying to that. Well, once you say that, you're telling some people, not all, some people, don't bother. Hang in there, get a C or a D in your classes, pass, get a job. Don't push yourself because the elements are against you. And the whole article goes into proving that point, and we don't really have time for that. But just imagine if you say you don't have power to do what you want to do. What a terrible, terrible message to send to young students.
Well, hold on, Dan. I want to do the devil's advocate just a little bit to try to. So here's how I understand it. I understand, well, critical race theory. So it's a part of a larger intellectual development, and they're bringing something to the law, some of this postmodern kind of deconstruction kind of thinking, and they're personalizing it. They're saying, you know, their ideas and their social relations, and the two things are not just disconnected from one another. And they're positionalizing it. They're saying how you think and how you experience depends on where you are in a set of power relations.
That's right.
Now, the flip side of saying it's their fault, which is what Bell is inviting the Black reader to do, to say it's their fault, is to internalize the responsibility for it and to say it's our fault. And
I'm sorry, who's the hour in this? Who's the hour in that?
Let me just finish this. Let me just finish it very, very brief. I mean, so you know Frantz Fanon, the wretched of the earth, you know, this argument about power and about self-hatred and about, you know, so that kind of, he just, I'm saying it's not only agency. That seems to be your point. Your point is a surrender of agency.
That's a starting point, yes.
It's also power and the experience of subordination and the eating away at the soul. And he's trying, this is not my argument. This is Derek Bell's argument. I don't actually believe this argument, but I'm trying to make sure it gets heard. He's trying it's faces at the bottom of the well. That's what he calls his book.
And I understand that entirely. And my point is that if you tell a group of people, you are the deciders in these areas, and white, if you're not Black, you have no standing. Once you tell people that, you're skewing the conversation, and you'll never get it right, ever, because you need to hear from opposition. That's the whole point of diversity. The whole point of this diversity explosion that we've seen is to say to people, you cannot rely on any one group, one person, or one group of people for your instruction. You got to listen to everybody. And the critical race theorists have made it impossible for others to speak. And you've testified just a few minutes ago that kind of feeling is yours. You feel constrained. Why should you feel constrained? Why should I feel constrained? Why should the Black community not say, we welcome you, you'll help us hone our message? That's the whole point, hone our message. And maybe then we'll have we'll have buy-in from everybody, maybe.
Dan, I'm going to try something here. I'm putting myself in the head of the haters here. And I'm going to put you into a little box, and I hope you don't mind.
I don't mind at all.
You are a Jewish American man of a certain age. And part of what might be informing your vision is you're thinking Jews were roundly despised in the United States, almost institutionally until relatively recently. And yet the general attitude among Jews was never, we simply cannot excel. And anytime we do just okay needs to be seen as excellent because non-Jews don't like us. The idea was you make the best of the worst. And that seems to have more or less happened. And you're thinking maybe, why is it that so many Black intellectuals in particular find a defeatist message like Derek Bell's so compelling? And what a lot of people would say, there are people looking at this right now, who will look at this soon, and say it's different for Black people because the hatred against us is more implacable than it ever was against the Irish or the Italians or the Jews. And so we need a new paradigm. What would your answer? And frankly, I don't agree, but what would your answer to that be?
My answer would be is there's no substitute from hearing from everybody. If you want to get your message across, you've got to persuade everybody. And right now, that's not happening. A lot of people, and you can see this in the newspapers just within the last week, things are happening. Things are changing. The New York Times is writing articles about critical race theory and things that they never published. While you're right that I'm sure my philosophy is affected by the fact that I'm a Jewish American and I've never complained. I don't think that that's ultimately the answer that I would give. I would give the answer that I don't have to make it to the top. I'll do what I can. I'll push. I'll have friends who push with me, and it'll be good enough. If I'm not president of the United States, I can live with that. Even if the reason for why I'm not president is that I'm Jewish. That's how I feel.
That's the reason you're not president.
Oh yeah, thank you. And you know, I accept that from you since you know me so well.
Yes, you should be president. No, I just wanted to ask that question. I mean, the most pernicious aspect of what you're talking about, at least in my sense of daily experience, is less that somebody says, well, because of racism, I'm not going to try, than that there's a sense that we don't have to try as hard, and that if we only halfway get there, that has to be regarded as excellence. Don't expect too much of us because of racism. Which is the same thing, but different. That's the hardest aspect of all of this, that it creates a sense that lowered expectations are okay. And when we just show up, we're doing our best. And there are many people who think of themselves as very pro-Black who now are making arguments of exactly that kind and thinking of themselves as race men and race women. That's hard. And that does come from something that Derek Bell, I don't think he started it, but that kind of rhetoric that he espoused made attractive. Yes, it's
John, you've given me a lot of food for my article, and I want to tell you something that you said not long ago that still sticks to me. You were talking about a hypothetical student who comes to your office and complains about how racism is getting in his way, and he hurts. And your response is, "No, you don't hurt." That knocked me out.
I don't know if that's exactly the story, but what I would tell that person is, don't perform delicacy. Don't pretend it's worse than it is and think that that's your job as an enlightened Black person in the 21st century. And you need to really think about what hurt is. Yeah. And I should tell the audience that particular thing has never happened, but if it did happen, that is what I would say. My message is, yes, life is hard, and you don't want to minimize things that actually happen to you, but performed delicacy is antithetical to a coherent social fabric. I do very much believe that.
And why are you the only person? Glenn, I don't know if you've said that in so many words or otherwise.
Yeah, Glenn, have you had that?
We need to have more people say that. There are things that happen in this world, are the ups and downs and the bumps, and we need people to say it's not the end of the world. If you hurt from this, you don't have a chance of surviving in the society. There's going to be a lot more stones thrown at you from all directions and for all reasons. Between now,
I want to identify a problem. I agree with what you're saying, Dan, but I want to identify a problem. The specter of failure and the rumors of inferiority. Okay. It's one thing to say, go perform without a net. It's another thing to fall off the high wire. So now the objective facts on the ground are very difficult to take. Look at law, order, punishment, shame, condemnation. The racial disparities at the bottom end in terms of behavior, harmful behavior that hurts other people, are stratospheric.
Yes.
Look on the high end at the exquisitely refined human achievement, which is the very highest level of performance within intellectual and academic and artistic endeavor. Accepting the artistic, African Americans are as scarce as hen's teeth.
Well, let's not overdo that.
Okay.
20% of the law school deans in America are African American.
Come on, Dan.
I'm sorry, that's worth something. That's worth a lot, in fact.
No, I'm talking about Caltech.
Okay.
I'm talking about the National Medal of Science. I'm talking about the Nobel. I'm talking about the elite venue. No, I'm just saying, if you want people to be indifferent about, the slings and arrows and whatnot, you got to give them some cover from the specter of their own failure as a group and from the haunting suspicions of inferiority. You can reject it out of hand, but the facts are still staring you in the face. And that is why, I'll conclude, that is why the narrative that we all deplore of victimology is so stubbornly durable. Because it's cover from the specter of failure and the rumors of inferiority. It gives us cover. You want to take it away? What are you going to put in its place?
Well, let's put it this way. I don't think we've made a whole lot of progress over the last 20 years in terms of performance, racial performance. The gaps in the school system are enormous. They've been enormous for years. And all of the effort, all of the intellectual effort, all of the money that's gone into it has not changed the balance with respect to things like the SATs or LSATs, objective measures. What we get instead is from large elements of the Black community is these tests are produced by whites. They don't care about you. They're designed to make you look bad. We need people to say that. We need people to confront that and object to that. And I don't hear it coming.
Well, I've been objecting to it for a long time, and so has John.
I'm talking about the community at large.
The test is just a messenger. The test is just giving us information about the development of people's potential.
But
to shoot the messenger, that doesn't solve the problem.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't solve the problem.
Dan, I know what you're referring to.
I'm sorry?
I know what you're referring to. You mean, why isn't the message getting out more beyond weirdos like Glenn?
Exactly.
And so, for example, I had an experience recently in Vancouver. I was invited to speak. And, these things are rarely open conflagrations, but I think I offended the people who invited me at the dinner afterward because of exactly what we're talking about, where we were talking about an actual student in the audience who had stuck up for the idea of having, all Black dormitories and saying that she needed that sense of safety. And folks, let's face it, we're talking about Canada. We're not talking about the United States. It's just the same in Canada, believe it or not. And I had said, politely but firmly, no, it's not that bad. It's not necessary to protect yourself from such a small degree of racism on a campus like this.
Did you see?
I was interrogated about that at the dinner, and I wouldn't budge. I just kept on saying, I'm very sorry, but no, I believe what I'm saying. I do not believe in that kind of performed delicacy. And the people there, no one said, fuck you. But everybody's polite. Everybody shook hands afterward. But I could tell major no. I was considered a bad guy. And that, unfortunately, is normal. That is something that I could have encountered on any college campus. And you're saying that that's the problem. Yeah.
That's the problem. And I came across something, a column by Andrew Sullivan the last couple of days. Listen to this. In 2021, 6% of the corporate jobs, 6% of the corporate jobs went to whites. 94% went to people of color. This is from a Bloomberg study cited that Andrew Sullivan cited. That's unbelievable. How can you? I mean, it's hard to make arguments.
Are you saying corporate DEI jobs?
No, I'm not saying corporate. This is his, not DEI.
I mean, it can't possibly be all corporate jobs. So that
all I'm telling you is that I'm sure that Andrew Sullivan knows that corporate DEI jobs are going to go to minorities. I'm sure he knows that. This is, and I'm sure this is an aberration. Nevertheless, it tells you something about the status of Black people in America. Now, I did read even more recently, maybe it was last night, that those numbers are not holding up and they can't possibly hold up when 94% of the hires.
This is a very specialized. These are the Black elites. This is a college-educated professional class. What about the ghettos? What about the jails that are overflowing? What about the welfare rolls and whatnot? And what about these huge public school systems that are producing millions of kids who can't read and count? That's what the fat part of the distribution, where the real inequality is manifest.
I agree entirely. And the question is, what do we do about it?
Yeah.
Besides spitting at white people and spitting at the culture generally, what do we do about it?
Well,
hating the establishment is not going to do anything in that regard.
Well, that's the problem for a lot of people. The idea is expressing that hatred articulately is activism. And somehow that's doing something. And it's self-indulgent, it's tempting, it feels good. It's the major drift since the 60s that has done the Black community in. The issue is, what do you do? For a lot of people, what you do is you articulate the nature of racism in a charismatic way. Or Ibram Kendi would say that what you do is you take that thing in cartoons where you push it down and you make an explosion. You get one of those and you just blow up society and pretend that there's no such thing as standards and allocate everything according to how people constitute a proportion in society. And then round up. The idea is that at least for a while, everything should be roughly half Black.
Right.
And of course, that's a fourth grader's notion of how society is to be changed. And beyond that, yes, it's tough. It's hard.
Well, I think you have to take a conservative approach to this broad set of problems. I think you have to get behind the cops and establish order so that they don't loot and whatnot. I think you need to confront the teachers' unions and hold them accountable and give families options and whatnot. I think you need to embrace traditional values and affirm exactly the opposite of what the cutting-edge, avant-garde, postmodern radicals want to do with the family. I think you have to recognize that the Democratic Party is leading Black people around with a ring through their nose and is playing us and declare a certain amount of political independence. I think the only solution is moving in a kind of radical and to the right direction in reaction to these things. I don't think it's going to happen. I'm a pessimist, not an optimist, but that's what I think is required here.
I think it's going to happen. I sense that the waves are growing against critical race theory and its related components.
What's the evidence, Dan? I'd like to know.
Look at the New York Times talking about what was it that they talked about? I put this in my article. It's relating to an announcement for a job in life sciences at a major university. I can't remember the university now. 75% of applicants were rejected purely, that's their word, not mine, because their diversity statements now required were deficient. 75% was simply cut off.
I heard about this.
You heard about that. Okay, then the rest of the study went like this. 13% of the final, 13% of the applicants were Latinos, who made up 59% of the finalists. 13% of the applicants were Latinos, who made up 59% of the finalists. In life sciences, this is not sociology, this is life sciences. And on the other side of that, 13% of the finalists were white, but they made up 59% of the applicants. So the question then becomes, how do you read into those data, any racism, racial antagonism, whatever you want to call it? How do you do that?
Well, you can. I mean, it's been obvious for a long time that that's the claim, that there's racial exclusion of Black or Latino applicants in higher education, whether it's admissions or hiring, is absurd. That claim is obviously wrong. But now the Supreme Court has spoken on this, Dan. The last decision on affirmative action was pretty unequivocal. So
it was unequivocal, but it's so full of holes that it'll never stand up in the long run. The holes being that you can talk all you want about racism in your letter to your introductory letter to the school when you're applying. So if the school wants to apply an affirmative action criterion, it's going to do it. It's not going to do it based on anything. It's not going to do it based on anything else than the statement that you make.
Do you have a closing word for the audience, Dan, on the critical race theory issues?
Let's see. Do I have a closing word? Yes, I do. Everybody has to speak up. We cannot let elements of the population be intimidated by other elements of the population. We all have not only a right to speak up, but an obligation to speak up, because if we don't speak up, trends develop. And some of those trends are damaging. Many of the trends are damaging. You need to have the discipline of a resistance. You can't crowd them out. You can't banish them on any theory. We've got to hear from everybody. That's the only way we're going to get buy-in in the nation. And that's what I call for.
Okay, well, I'm on board with that mission, and I'm doing my part speaking up. So is John. That's what the Glenn Show is all about.
Do you have a title for the article?
Yeah. So far, it's called "Can We Talk
About Critical Race Theory?"
Can we talk about critical race theory?
Okay.
Can we really talk about
really talk? Really talk, right? Yeah.
Really talk.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what, Dan, we'd be happy to publish your essay at glennloury.substack.com, but I'm afraid you probably were looking for a larger audience than that.
Actually, that's an interesting idea. I didn't realize you were publishers.
Well, meaning I put it up on the site.
You publish your own stuff. You publish your own stuff, but I didn't realize that you considered publishing.
Guest essays, kind of thing like that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's terrific to hear. Thank you for inviting me.
Drop me an email and we'll talk.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
You know, John and I often talk about higher education on this podcast, obviously. That's the universe we both inhabit. And why not? It's a topic that is at the forefront of the ongoing national conversation. Free speech on campus, viewpoint diversity on campus, cancel culture on campus, soaring tuition, affirmative action, race-based admissions, the erosion of standards, attacks on the classics, hiring litmus tests, critical race theory, diversity, equity, and inclusion. You name it, it's in the news. So, with all that's going on, and there's a lot going on, to whom can one turn as a trusted resource of all issues related to campus reform? There's one source we want you to know about and strongly recommend as a credible and respected voice on all of these issues, and that's the American Council of Trustees and Alumni, or ACTA, whom we're pleased to have supporting this episode. ACTA is on the front lines, promoting academic excellence, academic freedom, and accountability at America's colleges and universities. On October 27, 2023, ACTA will convene in D.C. for its 18th annual Athena Conference and Gala Dinner, a day-long celebration of academic excellence and academic freedom. At this year's event, ACTA will present its 2023 Philip Merrill Award for Outstanding Contributions to the Liberal Arts to Alan Charles Kors, who is the Henry Charles Lea Professor Emeritus of European History at the University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Kors has dedicated his life's work to transmitting the values of Western civilization to the next generation and advocating for open inquiry and individual liberty on campus. As an aside, ACTA presented this award last year to my friend, the estimable John McWhorter, and I was there to honor John with a tribute speech. In addition to the annual Merrill Award, ACTA will also recognize a faculty member who has exemplified academic freedom. And this year, the hero of intellectual freedom will go to Dr. Carol Hooven, human evolutionary biologist, author, and award-winning educator. She is now a newly minted senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. You can learn more about ACTA by visiting www.goacta.org. Okay, John. So we're going to have to talk about something else. And the something else, John, looks like it's Ibram X. Kendi again. It's the brouhaha at Boston University, the piece in the New York Times, in the Boston Globe pieces, people speaking out, disgruntled colleagues, administrative review of the Center for Anti-Racism Research. And we've had occasion from time to time here on the Glenn Show to mention Ibram X. Kendi and, even to offer a word or two of critical observation about his scholarship and his persona and whatnot. So what do you make of the current situation up there at Boston University?
Well, Glenn, it's interesting. I have a piece coming out in the Times about this that I think you're not going to like.
Uh-oh.
Because what I want to know is this. Why is there so much joy about what happened to Kendi? Not only among conservatives, but in the media, it's people of all stripes who are so happy to see that guy getting his butt kicked. What is all this joy about? You're joyous. Why?
How do you know I'm joyous?
Because you are. And because, Glenn, in a way, so am I, but I don't know if it's for the same reasons as other people are. But yeah, I mean, there's a part of me that's saying it's about time, but not for the reasons that a lot of people are thinking. Like, for example, preview. I don't think he's a grifter. I don't think that he's been trying to put one over on people. It's not that this near criminal is being brought to justice. I don't think of it that way at all. Do you?
Oh, John. No, I mean, I almost don't know what to say, but I'm going to, because we're friends, I'm going to pay you the respect of being honest with you. I mean, that just feels like a pose. The line that you are describing to me coming from you feels like a pose. Everybody's schadenfreude, everybody's enjoying this disaster of this guy. Yep. They're crowing and they're whatnot. And I mean, sure. That's not very honorable. That's not very edifying, that kind of response. Chicken's coming home to roost. What did Malcolm X say after the Kennedy assassination? That kind of thing. That's cheap. That's not. And I don't think that's where I'm coming from. But you, instead of going to the heart of the matter, which is an empty suit was elevated to an academic guru position and a ton of money fell on him. And the whole thing fell about because he was an empty suit, which reveals the superficiality of the virtue signaling mania that ensued after George Floyd got killed in Minneapolis in 2020. There was never any there. The emperor had no clothes. This is precisely Hans Christian Andersen's Emperor's New Clothes situation. This is the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain that's been revealed. Instead of that, you use your lofty position and your megaphone of influence to ask questions about the people who are, happy to see the whole thing fall apart. So I will plead guilty as a former race research director at Boston University, who for 6-7 years ran a center on a shoestring that produced real research that has alumni who are serious players in their respective disciplines on questions of race and inequality. And that was edifying, that was uplifting, that was a crown jewel in the offerings of Boston University at an intellectual level. Instead of that, that was me. That was Glenn Loury in the 1990s, everybody. Glenn Loury in the 1990s had a Boston University Research Center, and we did real research. And I'm not going to begin to run down the name of Nobel Prize winners and nationally renowned and internationally renowned scholars across a half dozen disciplines who were my guests as speakers and as fellows at the institute that I ran at Boston University. Instead of that, you got this. It was rotten to the core. The whole thing was absurd. He was going to solve the racial inequality problem through anti-racist research. He's an empty suit. He doesn't know anything. That's been obvious from day one. So it's not about him. Right. It's about the institutions and about the mania of that moment. And by the way, the consequences of the mania of that moment are playing out in real lives all across this country. With cities overrun, with ill-behaved people, with law enforcement apparatus being pulled back, with ridiculous ideology, with failed school systems, with mediocrity everywhere you look. Kendi is just a symptom of something that was very deeply and profoundly wrong. What about Black Lives Matter? What has become of them? What about Ta-Nehisi Coates and Nicole Hannah-Jones? Yes, I will go there. What has become of them? They were going to go to Howard and build some kind of center. Where is it? So I'll stop. I'm disappointed that you didn't go for the jugular. That's what I'm saying.
Well, the thing is, who's jugular? And so, I mean, what it comes down to is this. Kendi is not an academic. He is not a scholar. And I don't mean that as a put down. I mean, that's not what he does. He calls what he does scholarship, but I don't think he quite gets that there's a difference between primary and secondary sources. He does not take original material and fashion novel interpretations. That's what academics do. He has never done that. He has chosen not to do that. That's not his mission. What he wants to be is an anti-racism activist. He happened to get a doctorate. And if you get a doctorate, it does open certain doors. That's understandable. But it's painfully clear from his CV, from, frankly, just listening to him for about 5 minutes, that he's not an academic. And if you put it the right way, you could even say it to him and he might even agree that there's a difference between what you and I cut our teeth doing and what he's doing. I think he thinks he's doing something more important, and there's an argument for it. He's out in society trying his version of trying to change real lives, but that's not a scholar. However, all of a sudden in 2020, he gets swept up into this institution where he's supposed to be supervising real research. He's supposed to be supervising people who did choose to be academic scholars in the true sense, as opposed to his different choice of what he is going to concern himself with. And he'd also, if you tried to have me administrate something, I would have that thing a smoking hole in the ground in 2 weeks. I would have no idea what I was doing. I don't want to do it. I get the feeling he's similar. He hadn't had any experience running anything, and he's not terribly interested in doing it. I feel him there, but he gets thrust into this position. Why would we expect him not to take it? Is he really supposed to say, no, I'm not a real researcher, or I don't do what these people do? What would I be doing supervising these people? Especially because, and this is where I really kind of hate to go, but given the field that he's in, the department in particular that he got his degree in, I hate to say that too, because my mother taught at Temple University. I'm talking about a particular department, talking about Malefi Kete Asante and where we would put him in terms of what scholarship actually is.
That's where Kendi's degree comes from. He comes from the Afrocentrist.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
And so how would he know the difference? I mean, there's a part of it that I'm not sure he understands, that he doesn't do what actual academics do. But why would we expect him to have turned it down? And so the jugular here is Boston University. Okay. The jugular is anybody in 2020 and thereon who has casually referred to him with terms like scholar and academic and intellectual. And it's clearly...
What about the McWhorter Foundation?
You don't want to sound like you're jealous, but frankly, that too...
What about didn't he win a National Book Award?
Yes, he did. And frankly, yeah. And so that's the jugular that you go for, in that it's kind of like what we were just talking about with Dan. there is sometimes a lowered sense of what an academic is when it comes to what Black figure is going to be celebrated. I cannot be mad at Kendi for that. I mean, he just got swept up into something where I think all of us would have taken the money. All of us would have taken the fame. Now, he and I now have a history, which he started. And so, you know, I'm not saying that he and I are going to be having beers, but I'm not. All of this fell apart because he was chosen for something that he shouldn't have been chosen for. But why be mad at him? Do you see what I mean?
Well, I don't know why defending him from anybody's anger is of concern to you, but you can keep your own counsel on that. Let me just posit. I'm not, as it were, mad at him when I point out that he's a fraud. When I point out that he's an empty suit, that, as I said, he's a lightweight, okay? When I call attention to the vacuity and the emptiness of the rhetoric, how to raise an anti-racist baby? Come on. So,
Glenn,
I'm not mad at him to say you an embarrassment. You're an absurdity. That's simply a description.
That's not accurate, Glenn. You can't call him an embarrassment or an absurdity when he was put into a position by other people. If anything, they made him make himself into an embarrassment. It wasn't his fault. If things were the way they ordinarily would be under normal standards of evaluation, he would be an obscure Black studies professor teaching at some state university. That's what he was before all these things happened to him by chance. But he got swept up into something. How can you call that person an embarrassment when it's not his fault? The embarrassment is BU. I'm embarrassed for Boston University as a representative of what American higher education can be.
Then let's talk about that. I mean, because I agree with you that that's really the issue. And I don't have a stake in up or down on Kendi as such. I think his own biography and arc of his career speaks for itself. Why don't we talk about the institutional problem here? Because as I say, it's not just BU. It's much broader than that.
What BU did is an insult to Black intelligence. But let me change that because that's too mean to Kendi. What BU did, he doesn't deserve it. What BU did is an insult to Black achievement. And the best defense I can imagine they would have is that, of course, showbiz is part of things and showbiz does attract funds. But the idea that you, on the one hand, could be heading an anti-racist center that was so excellent 30 years ago, and that as if he was remotely capable of doing the same thing, is utterly miscast, is a diminishment of Blackness. The people who did that ought to be ashamed of themselves, frankly.
What about the people who paid him $40,000 to show up and give a half-hour-long talk without a Q&A? Do you want to put them on the list of people to castigate?
Yes. It almost feels like they're displaying that woman who was supposed to be George Washington's nursemaid, and she was supposed to be 104 years old. It's like they're showing off a Negro. And that payment, I don't have any problem with them taking the money if it's offered, but the idea that they would pretend that anything that particular person has to say is worth that much money, it's an insult. It's making a Black person a show in a way. And yeah, I think that's disgusting, but it's not him, it's them who on.
Have you actually read any of his stuff?
Yes.
Do you know what he says about Du Bois, about what he says about Frederick Douglass? Because Norman Finkelstein came on the Glenn Show a few months ago. Well, I don't know in chapter and verse because I haven't read Ibram X. Kendi and don't intend to.
I skimmed the first.
But Finkelstein in his book, I'll Burn That Bridge When I Get to It. Norman Finkelstein has a book. And it's a criticism of woke academic stuff. And he goes down the list of the critical race theory people. He goes down the Kimberly Crenshaws and the Derek Bells, takes on the Ta-Nehisi Coates and the whatnot. And he gets to Kendi. He has a long, long chapter on Kendi. And he reads, these books, and he says, this is me quoting Finkelstein, quoting Kendi on people like Du Bois. And he criticizes Du Bois for, being snooty and elitist. Du Bois wasn't elitist. There's not any doubt about that.
He was a post-Victorian.
And he criticizes Frederick Douglass for the white wives and the kind of, Republican kind of, Frederick Douglass's view of kind of cosmopolitan identity and stuff like that. And Finkelstein's position is, who is this guy to even open his mouth and begin to talk about these people? And they're towering figures, and he is a fraud. And so I'm saying, you talk about it as if it was just, this thing happened, this mania struck society. Kendi happened to become identified as, this iconic thing. And so all of this largesse fell on him. It wasn't his fault. He took it. Anybody would have taken it. Don't be mad at him. And I'm saying he was venal. And moreover, that these stupid ideas have infected the minds of so many people. His books, the U.S. Army was buying his books and sending it out to people because that was the way in which you developed sensitivity on the racial question. It's poisonous. So stupidity on steroids in the name of my people, I object.
No. Glenn, if I may, just like you said.
Well, you're going to anyway, but I'll give you my permission.
Honesty is meant in friendship. You're not applying your full mental capacities to understanding a Kendi. And what I mean by that, you're not penetrating him, because I think you kind of don't want to, but think of it. He's this person who has taken on this post-Stokely Carmichael Black ideology, and he finds it congenial, partly because there is a visceral pleasure to thinking in these ways. But that ideology, fist up in the air, he'd be wearing a dashiki if it were 45 years ago or more. Big surprise, that perspective is not great on historical perspective, other than that there was racism everywhere, i.e. stamped from the beginning, his first book. That's the historical perspective. But for him to imagine what it would be like to be a Frederick Douglass within the different parameters of that time, different sense of what Black issues were, what was urgent, for him to imagine what W.E.B. Du Bois was growing up in Great Barrington, going to Europe, what Blackness was at that time, big surprise. He doesn't excel at thinking in those ways. And so to him, it's as if this Victorian man with a cane, sitting at a dinner table with Kendi, saying the sorts of things Du Bois would say about how some Philadelphia Negroes are lazy, etc. Kendi can only understand that on the terms of somebody sitting there and saying it in 1975. He doesn't go further back in that way. He's not that kind of historian. I can forgive him.
He's not any kind of historian.
I can forgive him that. He's doing his best, and he wasn't around real historians very much. I cannot hate him for that.
Okay, good. You forgive him. I don't forgive him. Okay, so we disagree about forgiving him, but what I want to talk about is the fraud that was perpetrated.
What fraud? By him.
The idea. I said the fraud that was perpetrated, not just by him. He's just a cog in the whole frigging machine. Yes. Post George Floyd, universities across this country committed themselves to anti-racist frenzies of one sort or another, from faculty hiring to curriculum to administration over their student bodies and so forth, and to their public-facing activities of their top administrative leadership and so on. To the philanthropists, the money that was raised, the things that were done in response in a moment of racial reckoning. He's an epitome. He epitomizes something. This is not about him personally. That you would waste your time defending him befuddles me. This is about corruption of essential institutions like the one you work for at the New York Times, about which I know you cannot speak. Corruption of museums, of orchestras. We've entertained people on this program who have spoken to us about that deep corruption of the theater and of the arts. Corruption of the sciences, where they have shut down STEM. Science is racist because blacks are not performing as well as they are on the basketball court in the physics laboratory. Corruption of which Ibram X. Kendi is a poster child. That's what I'm pissed off about.
We are pissed off about the same thing and to the same extent. But it's white people who should know better who have put his face on all of this stuff. So basically, here he is, somebody who thinks that all of this is a good thing. There are many, many people like him. He happened to be the one who got caught like the deer in the headlights because he had written a couple of books right before 2020 that had gotten around somewhat. And so that kind of view, you and I have met many people of the Kendi view. I always think he reminds me of this person and that person and that person who nobody's ever heard of. And to be honest, views like that are less likely to wind up teaching at Harvard Law than other ones. But we've all known that guy. This one happened to get caught into something much larger than he ordinarily would have. And so it's his face on it, sure. But when I look at that face, I just think, you know, to an extent, until he started ragging on me, I used to think I feel kind of sorry because he's caught up in something where he can't quite handle it. And it must be hard on some nights for him. Now, frankly, I don't have much pity if we're going to talk about the personal aspect, but that's less important. Generally, that face on all of this stuff that the army is pretending to believe and physics that doesn't require hard math and racist music theory and silly stuff going on in the theater and stuff going on in classical music, all of this makes me physically sick as well. But it's not as if Ibram Kendi got up and started pressing all these buttons and having this effect. He was fostered in order to do that by people play acting about racism. Yes, that disgusts me utterly. It's really been a shame. And if by chance the downfall of that center has a domino effect and it encourages people to maybe reconsider the content of his books, although I don't see why it would. I don't see any grand implosion. I don't see why things are going to change at all. People still are going to read the books and think this is the way it should be. It's because of people buying hundreds of copies of that book and spreading it around their institutions. Those are the people who ought to be ashamed of themselves, not that poor guy who just got swept up. But really, we're arguing semantics. Glenn, yeah, I'm as angry as you at all this stuff, but not at him. It's just, how could he have helped it?
Okay, well, maybe we are just arguing about minutia. Maybe, I mean, because I know we do agree, and it's a kind of defining feature of our brand that the woke racism crowd warrant to be condemned. Well, no. Well, criticized. Condemned is my word. I'm not sure it's your word.
They can't help it either, to an extent.
Yeah.
Criticized, yes. But I will unhesitantly criticize them because they ought to know better. They're acting. They're play acting. And sometimes their play acting means lionizing people who, under other circumstances, would not be and maybe should not be. Yeah. That's the problem. It's exhausting.
So you said an insult to Black intellectual, you think this false elevation of mediocrity to positions of honor because it is in the name of some pro-Black sentiment is a betrayal? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's what I thought I heard you say. And I'm wondering if my own anger doesn't really rest on that sense of betrayal and shame, really. A kind of, I want the opposite of which would be pride, the opposite of which would be, if I were Jewish and I were looking at the Nobel Prizes in economics or physics, and I would say, you see, my people have achieved. That's the upside. The downside is knowing that an empty suit is being paraded around and that this is what is going in front of the people on behalf of the value that I also affirm of anti-racism, and then feeling patronized, you don't hold me to the same standard. You think we're all children. You think we're for entertainment. You're placating us. You're afraid that we're going to throw a tantrum. You're telling us what you think we want to hear. You won't take us seriously. And that makes me angry.
That is more or less my feeling too. When you see something like that elevation, you can't help thinking, okay, that's what they think of Black people in general. You can't help thinking that to varying extents, that's being done to me, which I think both of us have to know is true. So for example, last semester, I viciously overscheduled myself because I am much less mature and heedful than most people would think. And I just let all this stuff go into my calendar. And I'm kind of at a new phase, especially with the times. I get asked to do a lot of things. I didn't realize what I was doing with myself. So I was doing something almost every night. I was away almost every weekend. It really wasn't a good thing. And I'm never going to allow it to happen again. But I made a list a couple months ago of all the things that I had been asked to do. And it was literally like 45 things in what felt like 90 days. And I wrote, never do this to yourself again. But if I look at that list, the truth is, I can't know how much of that was me. I know some of it was, and how much of it was they needed a brown face, especially if I was on a panel, or especially if it's a speaker series, and you kind of look at who else has spoken and you notice that all the other speakers over the past 2 years have been white. And then you think, well, was my color, especially after 2020, where they're thinking we need a Black one? And you know what, Glenn? You can never know. And to an extent, you have to just keep living. To do that kind of bean counting, you can go crazy. Enjoy your life the way it is. There are many people who would love to be you. That's the way I really think of it. But still, it's there. And when you see a more stark example of this sort of tokenism, yeah, it's infuriating because, and this is something that people like him would never understand. You look at it and you think, look at what they're doing to him. And then you think, there, but for the sake of God, go I. It's the same. It's the whole evaluation of the race that makes you furious in a situation like that. The head of the Center for Anti-Racist Research, if there was going to be one without Kendi, and you get the feeling there wasn't, but if there was going to be one, it should have been headed by somebody who probably most of us hadn't heard of. Somebody with a long CV of actual academic achievement and possibly at least. That's what it should have been. Now, like I said, maybe BU deserves a little bit of credit in that they wouldn't have gotten all that funding if it weren't for Kendi's star status. But couldn't there be something in between? And frankly, they should have settled for less funding and chosen somebody who actually had the qualifications. And so, yes, it's infuriating. And the implosion of the center, now I can't say that it's something that I'm unhappy about, but it's not me thinking that Kendi deserves it. And that's what all of the headlines are saying.
Now, what do you make? Yeah, I know you're aware of the complaints of some of the people within the center. This guy, Spencer Piston, I think is his name, political scientist, Saida Grundy, a sociologist. They've been quoted in the newspaper about this, and I've heard from Grundy in private correspondence, which I've shared with you. And you know that there are allegations about the way he conducted himself in his relationships to his employees and to other people. He imperious and unavailable and capricious and whatnot and so on, and didn't handle himself very well in that circumstance, which is separate from the other things that you've been talking about being placed in a position where, the fraud was evident, but it wasn't really his fault. How he related to his employees, how he delegated responsibility, how he attended to the requirements of living up to the promises that his grant committed him to, how he handled the personnel issues and whatnot. Those are his responsibility. We can't fault him if he's wrong about that, can we not?
I'm not sure that the powers that be had any way of knowing that was coming in 2020. I'm sure that he's capable of comporting himself properly in an interview. Yeah, that is just the individual him. And to be honest, I was at a conference with him at the end of 2019. Before he was big. He was just big. And it was very clear at that event that he's not a mixer. was my sense. What we're hearing now, I look back then and I think, the taciturn. Yeah, I can see from the person who I saw circulating at that thing. And notice I say saw circulating. I never saw him once join anything. He didn't come to the party. He's kind of kept to himself. I can see how maybe that would translate into this person that we're hearing about. But how could anybody have known that in 2020? Not to mention that, there are always differing stories. No, I'm not going to say that. Too many people are saying that about him for it not to be true. But I don't know if anybody could have seen it in 2020. And he's hardly alone as a manager.
Okay, so is that your next, you got to be timely now. Is that your next column?
Yeah, I think that's Monday. I wrote it yesterday at 5:00 in the morning. And
this will go up behind the paywall on Monday at glennlowry.substack, everybody. So we're talking to ourselves because it will already be Monday before anybody actually hears this. John, I'm glad to get the scoop on your next piece in the New York Times, with which I disagree vociferously.
I don't think we disagree as much as we disagree, but I know what you mean.
All right. And thanks to Dan Subotnik for joining us earlier on the show. We're going to sign off. Thanks a lot, John. Q&A. So how about we postpone that?
I wouldn't mind.
Okay.
Because it's been a long week, but I can we can do it soon.
Okay. I'll be in touch. Maybe toward the end of next week.
Not Friday, because that's my birthday. I'm doing.
Oh, John!
Turning 58.
I was going to say 58. You're just a little younger than my lovely wife, LaJuan, who was also born in 1965.
It was not a good year in many ways, but yes. So that day is my kind of blackout day. But other than
that's the year I graduated from high school, John.
Damn. Wow. Damn.
In my neighborhood, I'm old enough to be your father.
That's true. Wow.
Yeah, man. Yeah. All right. Good being with you. We'll talk in a few days.
All right. See you soon.
Bye.